Good evening, students. I welcome all the learners to this session on the policy implementation. I am Vayunandan from the Faculty of Public Administration, School of Social Sciences, and we have also with us Professor Pradeep Sani to discuss on the various aspects of policy implementation. I think last session, if you can recollect, we have discussed about the importance of policy, its formulation, and also discussed various types of policies and models, approaches, and also the constraints and challenges in formulation of the policy. Today, as I said earlier also, that we will be discussing on the policy implementation. So if you if you go through the Woodrow Wilson famous essay, I think what we understand as the concept which he comes up with, the politics and administrative dichotomy. One of the main emphasis he tried to say that the duty of the politics is to formulate the policies, that is the political executives, and the duty of administration, that is the permanent executive, is to implement the policies. And the emphasis was on more implementation, and that the main aspect of the duty of public administration is to implement whatever the policy is formulated by the political executive. And later we also found that because of various other things, that the public administration is also involved in policy formulation. It also plays a greater role because of the various things which we take into consideration. But the political executives are not having the knowledge or the information, because even though politically they are, democratically they are being given the space to formulate the policies, because of various reasons they have to depend upon the administrators. And coming to the earlier also, recollecting the earlier session, I think we all know what is policy. Public policy, as rightly said by Thomas R. Dye, that public policy is what the government chooses to do or not to do. And in a parliamentary democracy like in India, we all know that we have a cabinet, that is a council of ministers headed by the Prime Minister. Basically, they are the people who decide the policies, and no doubt the policies again reflects the various demands and needs of the various segments of the society, and all policies has to take care of the various aspects, and from policies emanates the programs, schemes, and various legislative enactments to see that the policies are effectively implemented. In earlier also we tried to discuss various types of policies, that we have substantive policies which are related to development, overall development, and regulatory policies to regulate the trade, finances, and other things, distributory policies to distribute various amenities, and we have also redistributed, because certain segments of the society needs, because they have to be provided various aspects through various subsidies or various other things. Then we have also the capitalization policies regarding industrialization, and also giving subsidies at various points to have the industrial development. The other important is there are certain stages in the policy, public policy process. The first is the formulation, which we all discussed earlier also. What is the importance of formulation, who are involved, what is the role of political executive, role of the permanent executive, role of legislature, role of judiciary also. Then we have other important is the policy education, which is very important, that you have to educate the masses and provide various information about the policies and the programs which comes out of these policies and schemes. Then the other which we are trying to emphasize is the policy implementation. So whatever good policies as we all know, can only be said if they are implemented effectively, and they must fulfill the object for which they have been formulated. So the good policies, if you only formulate on paper, they may not be good policies, but only thing is the effectiveness of that good policy can be known only when they are being properly implemented. So even some said that the success of public administration can be measured only in relation to the implementation of the policies. In other way, someone said, however good the political system, however noble the goals, however sound the organizational system, no policies can succeed if the implementation does not bear the relationship to the intentions of the policymaker. So such is the importance of policy implementation. So even today we have, in spite of, independence so many years, 62 or 60 years, we find that the policies which we try to understand are good, but unfortunately we feel that at the implementation side we feel that they are not been that effective. So whatever good policies you formulate, but till you effectively implement, I think that cannot be taken care. So this is what we understand. So there are, what we understand, there are a number of problems relating to the policy implementation, and we have also rightly seen that we have 5-year plans which try to specify the stages for the implementation of various programs and schemes, and also that in between this planning commission also has a mid-term appraisal to see whether these policies, or the programs which emanate of policies are being implemented, and time to time they also try to, suggest that how these policies can be implemented more effectively. So at this, what we understand, there are constraints, there are also certain, what we understand, the challenges, and also what we understand, also the various roles of various, played by various agencies, because what we understand that we normally follow the institutional approach mostly in Indian context. That is what we understand, that is we emphasize on the role of the government structure, right from the parliament to president to the, what we understand, the executive, that is permanent and political executive, and also the judiciary on the policy making and their implementation. So what we understand, the policy cannot become what you call public in character unless it is adopted and implemented and enforced by this same governmental institution, and that way the government provides legitimacy and universality of the public policies. So we have more emphasis on the what we understand, the institutional approach, either in the formulation or in the implementation. But recently, because of the liberalization and globalization and privatization, we also envisage the role of various other sectors like private as well as the community, as well as also we try to understand various non-governmental organizations who should also play a greater role, at least some sort of an what you call complementary role in implementation of the policies, so that we can at least try to find solution to the constraints as well as the problems which are coming up in the process of implementation. Now I request Professor Pradeep Sahni to discuss various aspects of the policy implementation.
Thank you very much, Vayu. In fact, Vayu was referring on to Woodrow Wilson's essay, The Study of Administration, while trying to make a distinction between politics and administration. Vayu, I would like to take you back on to the times when during even the ancient periods we find that there had been policies. In fact, the policies are probably as old as the state or the government is. When we talk of public policy process, we find that it is a very simplistic kind of a thing which gets benefit to large number of the people, and as you have said it, that it is whatever the government chooses to do or not to do, in the words of Thomas or die, or if one talks of in the words of Robert Eystone, it is a relationship of the government unit to its environment. Public policy is not a decision, it is a pattern or course of activity, and so on and so forth. In fact, when we refer to policy implementation, one finds that policy implementation is probably the kernel of the policy process per se. Howsoever good we may be in making the public policies, but unless and until the policies are implemented in the proper sense, then probably the desired end of that cannot be achieved. But what is policy? You were referring on to that in one of our earlier sessions. We have talked about the policy formulation, the policy cycle, the policy stages, the policy types. You talked of substantive, distributive, redistributive, capitalization, ethical policies, and so on. This 6-alphabet word, policy, each and every alphabet in this word, it connotes something which is worth looking at and pondering over in order to understand the significance of policy process and more so the policy implementation. Like when one talks of the first one, that is P. P stands for positive. When one talks of O, it is optimum. L is legitimate. I is invigorating. Then C is customized and Y is yielding. So all of this put together, when one looks at, then one finds that public policy implementation talks of where we find that it is goal oriented, it is result oriented, it is proactive, it gets something to some people. But when we look at public policy implementation mechanism or the process per se, and you have talked of the distinguishing features of the policy implementation process, the first which comes to my mind is that public policy implementation is not a linear, a coherent process. With policy implementation, change which comes into being, that change is multidimensional, that change is fragmented, that change is interrupted, and it takes hell of amount of time as well as action to prioritize what is to be done first, what course of action is to be taken up. Secondly, when one looks at policy implementation, one finds that public policy implementation as a process is not something which can be undertaken up by any single agency. You have said about it that administration, that is a permanent executive, has a major role to play in policy implementation. Needless to say, yes, that it has a major role to play in policy implementation, but along with that, permanent executive or the bureaucracy is being helped out a lot, more so now in the era of LPG, helped out a lot by the other actors, both governmental as well as non-governmental, in the implementation of the public policy per se. Then the third thing which comes into it is that it creates winners as well as losers. Somebody gets benefit out of it, somebody is at the losing end. So there again comes out to be that there is possibility of some kind of the conflict which gets into the society with the implementation of any particular given policy, because the size of the cake is limited. If we talk of waiving of the farmer's loan, so who has been benefited? Definitely the farmers. Is there anybody a loser? Directly or indirectly, explicitly or implicitly, that is to be seen. Sixth Pay Commission has been recommended by the Government of India. Now, the implementation of the Sixth Pay Commission, the burden which shall be there on the exchequer, who shall be bearing the brunt of it? May it be that even those who are not in the service sector at all, they will also have to pay the price for this particular thing. So there are some winners, some losers, so a proper balance has to be kept in view so far as the implementers are concerned when they are executing a given policy. The third thing, or the fourth component of that is that the resources required to implement policies may not be readily available. One has to cull it out from some particular thing, because as I did mention about it, that we have limited resources which are available with us. Depending upon those limited resources, we have to cut the things accordingly so that we are able to meet with those kind of the programs which are emanated through a particular given policy which we try to put into bears. But nevertheless, the importance or significance of policy implementation gets into being through the famous quotation of Henry Kissinger when he said it, "Outsiders believe that the presidential order is carried out strictly in the same sense in which the president did want to." He further adds, "Nonsense. I know with how much great difficulty I have to get it through in the order, in the spirit in which the president did intend." So this calls for that there are many ifs and buts which are involved in the mechanism of the implementation, and if there is some slip somewhere in the mechanism process of implementation of the policy, certainly the implementation will not be to the extent to which it could deliver or it could get the optimum results to the society, to the polity, and to the benefit of the community or the people by and large. So therefore, it calls for that the policy implementation mechanism is for what? What is the purpose for having the policy implementation mechanism? Why should we go in for a policy implementation mechanism? The first thing which comes to mind is that it is meant for meeting the government's commitments. Government's commitments to whom? If we look at the public policy making process or the policy process per se, we say that the policy making exercise does start even prior to the general election. At the time when the general elections are being announced, the political parties go to the voters and they tell them about their election manifesto. Election manifestos do contain certain kind of the programs which the party, if the party comes to power, the party would like to put those particular things into action. So it is at that stage itself that the political parties intentions for doing certain things for a particular given section of the society or sections of the society get into fore, and people do cast their vote in accordance with that. That is an idealistic kind of a situation. Whether it really happens or not, that is it becomes very difficult to say whether we are really prepared or we are really educated enough to weigh the pros and cons of a given scenario and to act accordingly and to exercise our vote in accordance with that. That is something which is really worth appreciative. I am reminded of an incident when I was attending a conference in Punjab University, Patiala. The Vice Chancellor, who had been the High Commissioner of India to Namibia, he said that when he was over there, so many people were talking good about Indian democracy. And he said, I was also given a mandate by the Ministry of External Affairs to speak about that. He said, all said and done, when the session was over, one gentleman, he stood up and he said that, Mr. Singh, I want to ask you a question. He said, I told him, yes, go ahead. He said, is your democracy, if it is so fine, then how come that a person of the caliber of Dr. Manmohan Singh gets defeated in elections in India? And he said, well, I virtually didn't have any answer to that. So, well, that is the level of our preparedness, that is the level of our understanding of the total scenario of the political framework, and under that kind of a given scenario, what is to be done and how better or how in a best way we are able to weigh those kind of the pros and cons, it is anybody's guess. So, well, the first thing for which the policy implementation mechanism is for, that is for meeting government's commitment. Second is, it is to assert political control over bureaucracy. Is it really required? Yes, it is required. Me and Vayu, we did work on administrative responsiveness in India, and when we were interviewing one of the leaders, the political leaders, Mr. Subramaniam Swamy, he said bureaucracy is like a horse. If the rider is not strong, then the horse and bureaucracy will go haywire. And the rider in that particular case is the political master. The political master, first of all, must own one's own responsibility and then try to guide or goad the bureaucracy to work in accordance with that. The third thing is that is anticipating policy design challenges. At the time of the formulation of the public policy itself, the implementers must be, the formulators must be very clear that what kind of the challenges they do anticipate that they shall be meeting with. It should not be that once the decision has been taken, it is being made public, and then we keep on thinking that what is to be done and what is not to be done. The recent example is before us when the Sixth Pay Commission constituted by the Government of India did submit its report. When the report was made public, there was resentment in the different segments of the services, and then what happened that the government had to appoint a committee of secretaries to look into that and then to take remedial steps in order to control or check such kind of the resentment. It should never happen in the true sense of the term if we talk of having a policy implementation in a foolproof manner. Of course, one could always say that there is always scope for improvement. Yes, scope for improvement is there, but scope for improvement should be made use of only in the manner where it definitely adds on to it, rather than taking the so-called corrective measures after you have taken one particular kind of a given initiative. That certainly is not a given kind of a thing. Fourthly, it is to navigate the implementation challenge besides promoting cultural change in delivery agencies and addressing political optics. These are the aspects for which the policy implementation mechanism is meant for. If these are the aspects for which it is meant for, then what does it aim at? What is the aim of policy implementation mechanism? To sum it up, it comes on to that it is for exploring and discussing contemporary issues affecting policy implementation. What could be contemporary issues in context of India? Could it be poverty? Could it be malnutrition? Could it be shortage of water? Could it be some kind of the techniques to be made use of for conservation of the environment and things like it? Could it be the pressure to go in for execution of the Millennium Development Goals which have been fixed forth by the United Nations, and the year 2015 has been fixed for that, and whereas when almost half of that period is over, then we come across the report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change which speaks of that we are not even nearer to 25% of that particular kind of a scenario? No, certainly it is not a call for kind of a scenario. It has to take these kind of things into consideration. Identifying and interpreting best practices, best practice implementation planning, resources, monitoring, evaluating, sustaining and learning. We being the students of public administration, we are often much comfortable with the acronym POST-COP, planning, organizing, staffing, directing, coordinating, reporting, budgeting. Each and everything keeps on revolving around that. There's nothing wrong into it, but only thing is that we have to look at each and every given scenario and then go in to find out that which best ways are to be made use of so that the implementation does go in a proper manner. If one says of it that, well, we should be creatively imitative, people may laugh at it. Creativity and imitative, both are opposed to each other. How could one be creatively imitative? Yes, one could be creatively imitative, imitate from the others, but with an element of creativity, so that it is not only cut and paste. It is not only taking from something and putting it over there, whether it is suitable onto that or not. No, that is not called for kind of a thing. Another thing is that one has to be investigative, substitutive approaches to be adopted. That when we are implementing something, during the process of implementation, we investigate into those particular aspects and then try to substitute it with something better if we feel that that something better could yield better results. So this calls for an open-ended thinking on the part of executors. Unless and until that is there in place, we will not find that the policy implementation mechanism could be optimal or could be foolproof. But that definitely calls for more and more of participation. That calls for more and more channels to be opened up, open discussion with the people, some forums or forums to be created whereby we could get the feedback, because need for immediate feedback is one of the 4 essential characteristics of a high achiever, as having been pointed out by one of the scholars by the name of S.W. Gellerman. Then it is exploring tools and techniques for transforming policy decisions into services and outcomes. What is important? If policy is an input, then what are we looking at? Are we looking at output or are we looking at outcome? Definitely we are looking at outcome. So if we are looking at outcomes, then those outcomes should be the ones which match the inputs in a manner that the inputs do not far exceed the outputs and the outcomes. So the tangible goal should be made to be seen very clearly, and people must get the benefit thereupon, and the society and polity must get further onto that. Then it is managing stakeholders' expectations. Who are stakeholders? You and me, everybody, each and every person is a stakeholder so far as the democratic polity is concerned. Government is of whom? Government is that of ours. It is our government. They are working for us. We have our genuine expectations, and we want the governors or the rulers to fulfill those expectations, and that is why we have voted them for in. So from that particular aspect, it becomes all the more obligatory to come up to the expectations of the stakeholders, and then developing skills and behaviors to lead policy implementation in an effective manner. That is again something very important to be taken care of. Who will develop the skills? Who will sharpen? Who will inculcate the required knowledge amongst the people? Is the knowledge which is being inculcated at a given point of time, is it sufficient enough for whole life of the individual? No, it is not, because things are changing, and with the changing complexities, we have to update our knowledge base. We have to bring in more and more such kind of things which are required to be implemented. There are newer and newer concepts and approaches which are getting into being, which we had when we were students, we had never even heard of it, but now we find that those are being implemented in the given scenario. So if this is the kind of a thing, what we find, if we take the example of India, we are one of the developing countries. Now, what are the challenges which are being faced for policy implementation in a country like India or the other developing countries like India? First is the gap in policy intent and the implementation framework. Primarily, we find that we have again a dichotomy which is there into existence. Our structure is still traditional, whereas our tasks or the functions are developmental. Policies are being made, the intents are something else, the implementation mechanism is entirely different. Development administration does call for that we should have the ground-based mechanisms for implementation of the developmental programs and the projects. In the similar manner, when we talk of the policies are being formulated. Supposing we are talking of Union Government of India, so the policies are being formulated at the Government of India level, which are to be implemented in a remotest corner so far as Northeast is concerned. definitely one finds it that unless and until we have the feel of that area, we will not be able to implement it in a proper manner. So therefore, at the time of formulation of the policy, or even prior to that, when we are trying to identify the policy issues on which the policies are to be formulated, we must take cognizance of these kind of the factors. Another thing is that is poverty, which is increasing. We keep on telling that no, this is the percentage of the people. So many people are above the poverty line or below the poverty line. Every weekend we find that the inflation is increasing. It is affecting people. Poverty is increasing. Incidence of poverty is increasing. People are dying of hunger and so on and so forth. So while the policies are also being made, the government is spending the money as well, but then where the money is going, it is a big question. Does it mean to say that, well, there is something wrong somewhere so far as the execution of the policies are concerned? Take up any sector. Nobody can deny the fact that the developments have not taken place in India, whether it is agriculture or it is education or it is industry or it is infrastructure or it is telecommunication or it is civil aviation or it is information broadcasting, and any field you pick up, you find that the developments in comparison to what we were way back in 1947, we have developed substantially in each and every area. But nevertheless, still we find that the challenges are this monster like poverty. It is still hovering over ourselves. Why is it so? Because the number is also increasing in the same manner, and the gulf between the haves and the have-not is also increasing further down. So that is again which has to be tackled when we do formulate the policy, and implementation has to be in accordance with that. Another thing is the regional imbalances. Some part of the country is developing more in comparison to the other parts of the country. Should there not be some kind of a parity amongst the developments which are taking place amongst the states? Should the union politics be the determining factor so far as these considerations are, which make these considerations to come upon on the scenario? This is again something to be looked into. Then it is incapacitated administrative offices, illiteracy, and so on. So, well, this is again, why do we find that administrative offices are incapacitated? Who has made them incapacitated? The structure is so overpressing, or do we find that we have started losing a kind of the faith in the office decorum or the office ethical working? Maybe somewhere certain things have to be seen. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, while addressing the issue, did talk of that we have to make administration transparent. Good enough, administration has to be transparent. Simultaneously, administration has to be effective and efficient as well. Who is to make administration effective and efficient? Are we to talk only in the sense of normativism? It should be like this, it should be like this, or we have to make it some kind of pragmatic also. These are the ways whereby we could do it. May it be that it is through right to information we are achieving certain things, but then right to information has its own challenges and the darkened areas as well. Those darkened spots have to be identified. Whatever are the positivities of it, those have to be more embellished so that we are able to get maximum out of it. In the similar manner, if the targets are gigantic, certainly nothing can be achieved. That is why we say that it should be simpler but faster. We should start in a simple manner and we should go in a fast way. That would lead us more towards sense of accomplishment, and sense of accomplishment will definitely motivate the individual, and a motivated employee or personnel is going to be more bigger an asset so far as an organization is concerned. Public or private, anywhere you may look into, the basic character of the individual of a given polity remains the same. How come we find that the people, our own brethren, they are working really with all sense of responsibility in the private sector, but so far as it is the public sector is concerned, we feel that, well, the atmosphere is not conducive. What kind of atmosphere? Who makes the office culture as an office culture which is to be imbibed or which is to be addressed to? Certainly, it is the people, those who are working over there, and along with that, there is an element of responsibility which is being fixed for. Now, well, the government is talking of that we will try to make administration more responsible, more accountable. Thinking of these kind of the terms after so many years of independence, maybe even if we do it now, probably we can head towards a better future. And this time the number tally which we have got in the Olympics, maybe it can increase, because the implementation of the policy gets to be seen at each and every end, whether it is Olympic or it is the cropping, or it is industrialization, or it is hospitalization, or it is education spread, and so on and so forth. In the similar manner, we find that another challenge towards policy implementation in developing countries is inadequate coordination among the different stakeholders. left hand doesn't know what the right is doing. Number of agencies which are involved over there in the execution of a program, each one is doing something, but at the end of the day we find that nothing concrete is being taken up. Any program you may take into consideration, take into stock the drought-prone area program, take into consideration the desert development program, take into consideration what has happened with regard to rehab program after tsunami in Pondicherry and Tamil Nadu and the other states in the year 2004. We find that so many agencies get into being, and because of lack of coordination, the resultant of those particular things are not happening in the manner in which those could happen. One is referred on to, I was just going through the document issued by United States Agency for International Development, where they have talked of 6 sequential stages or tasks in the policy implementation. The task 1 is being referred on to, that is legitimation. Public policies are definitely the ones which is being done up by the government, so well they have the sanctity of law behind them. They are legitimate. So well, if they are legitimate, those have to be implemented and those have to be adhered to, and it given due kind of the credence by whosoever which is involved therein, because otherwise the people are going to be termed as law offenders, and law offenders do not find any place in any civilized society. So the first thing is that it's legitimation to be given to the policy which is being formulated. Now, well, one thing is that you have the sanction of law, so whatever you do, that is legitimate. No, it is not being taken up. We find what has happened in the recent past on this issue of signing the treaty with America on this nuclear aspect. Well, the vote which was there before the parliament, the debate which had taken place, so well, that speaks of that, well, there is scope for a healthy kind of the debates to discuss about each and every issue, and then whatever is being considered to be the best, that has to be put into being, and that brings forth the element of the first task, that is the legitimation. Second task is task 2. They have said that it is constituency building or gaining active support from the groups. Minus the support of the people or the area where you are going to implement the policy, it becomes very difficult for the policy to yield better results. Why policies are made? Policies are being made for the betterment of the area or the group or the segment of the society. Unless and until we have active support which is coming through the way of implementers, it becomes very difficult for implementers to cope it up. If you consult your material of EPA 06, our course on public policy at the undergraduate level, it is referred on to that how citizens can play an active role in policy implementation. In the similar manner, if you consult our material of MPA 015, that is a Masters in Public Administration course on public policy and analysis, again the implementation and the role of the various organs, including NGOs and civil society organs, etc., is being referred on to. Same is true with regard to our other courses which have reference onto it, like MPA 011, State Society and Public Administration, and MPA 013, that is New Public Systems Management. Everyone is talking of, and the theoretical basis of it one can get through the 012, that is the Administrative Theory course. In the similar manner, the third task is that is resource accumulation. Where from? Size is known to everybody, size of the cake, the budget, the amount which is available with us. Now, where from we have to accumulate more and more resources for getting the finest kind of the policies to be implemented. Everybody wants that the government should do the excellent kind of the work for himself, for herself, for themselves, but definitely where from the government is get to money for? Are we to make the policies in the manner that those policies are really productive and they contribute towards it? Or we feel to say that, well, more and more should be spent upon subsidizing the issues and keep on getting it. The report which has been submitted recently by B.K. Chaturvedi, whereby the report says that, well, each and every cylinder, this liquefied petroleum gas cylinder which is being consumed by majority of us in the urban areas, that is costing the government 614 rupees, and we are paying 297 or 298 rupees for that particular thing. The rest is being met by the government as subsidy. So, well, if that is the manner, certainly we will not be able to do that. Nevertheless, I don't mean to say that such kind of a thing should be done away with, but then mechanisms have to be found out whereby we are able to strike a viable balance, whereby the things also keep on moving and the development of the country is not put on hold. The fourth task is that is organizational design or structure, which has to be conceived depending upon the kind of policies you are going to implement in a given area. So the locale, the geographical consideration, the demographic features of that area, All these have to be taken into stock when you design the organizational structure for the execution of the policy. It should not be top heavy or top lean. Well, it should be the best suitable or conducive structure which has to be made so that we could go along with that. It is the fifth task is mobilizing actions, and second is monitoring impact. Minus all these things are taken into consideration, probably implementation of the policies will be only a dreamt of kind of a thing, and we will not be able to achieve much out of it. We will keep on making the policies, but those policies would not be able to yield the result the way those are expected to yield. So that is what has to be focused upon. Yes.
I think, as you have rightly said, a lot of constraints and challenges, and equally you have tried to see how these challenges can be met and how we can make the implementation more effectively, achieve those whatever is being decided in the policy. But there are new trends which has come up recently. The government is going for partnership, and also the new other thing is that completely giving to the private sector through what you call the BOT, build, operate and transfer, mostly the infrastructure areas. And also one other important thing which we come across is the ICT, which is also making the implementation.
Look, Vayu, the issues which you have raised like build, operate, BOT or ICT, these are very good. See, these are laudable. But these are laudable only when the implementers also understand and appreciate what is to be done. I was being told by one of the colleagues today itself that going to a private operator and getting a lukewarm kind of the response therefrom, what does it speak? Does it speak of that our bureaucratic culture, what we used to see in the public sector, is creeping now even in the private sector?
Yeah.
Other thing is information communication technology. It is very essentially required. See, outsourcing is required, privatization is required, partnerships are required. On the basis of public-private partnerships, we have achieved some success stories in the country. India is such a country, we have so much of diversity that anything you find, you feel that there are excellent sides of it and there are absolute negative sides of it. You have the best kind of the infrastructure and the work culture in certain sectors, you have the worst kind of it, and both are in existence simultaneously in private as well as in public organizations. That is one kind of a thing. When we talk of policy implementation, you see, what is required is both at the macro as well as at the micro level. It is being done up by whom? It is being done up by individuals. It is being done up by a group of people. What is a group of people? Group of people are collectivity of individuals. So each and every individual probably under the leadership of a given person, whether it is appointed leader or it is assumed leadership, whichever way. I mean, one may talk of even Hawthorne experimentation onto that the social leadership or the group leadership and so on and so forth. So the first thing which is required is that is nurturing a personal vision on the part of the implementer. What is to be done? How can it best be done? And one must be very emphatic in saying no to it when one finds that it is difficult to carry it out. The moment an implementer agrees on to a particular thing after saying no first, but then yielding to the pressure, agrees on to it, that means that the implementer has put his reputation at stake. Nobody is going to believe him for the second time, because people will say that this guy works only when some pressure is exercised upon him. So the first thing is that is nurturing personal vision. Second thing is that is developing a shared vision. Personal vision, then the shared vision. Shared vision is that of the collectivity of the people, those who are working or those who are involved therein. Because along with the shared vision, when everybody owns one's own responsibility and then it becomes a responsibility of the group carries it further. When you carry it further, you have channels like interacting with each other, getting information from various sources which are over there, whether it is through media, both print as well as electronic. These days we find that the electronic media is really much agog with all kinds of things. Whatever little even happens, that is being aired and people are made to know about that. That helps in formulation of public opinion. Public opinion plays a substantive role so far as the execution of the policies is concerned. That has to be kept in view. Thirdly, when one talks of that is thinking systematically. what is to be done. We must be sequential insofar as our approach is concerned. It should not be haphazard that whatever comes my way, I will do that, I will leave the rest of the things. No, there should be some plan of action being formulated, and in accordance with that plan of action, we must go along with that so that we are able to achieve the thing. And this particular process starts not only at the time of implementing the policy, but this process does start on the part of policy actors right at the time of formulation or framing of the policies. They have to keep that what possible could be the challenges in their way, and they have to go in accordance with that for trying to find out ways onto it. Then it is to move beyond the traditional focus on quality. Let us keep on adding on to that how best something can be designed. Not necessarily that every experiment would prove out to be a success. Well, we also learn by our mistakes, but when we do who commits a mistake? Only the person commits mistake who will do work. So, but then that means that the mistakes would also be committed if we will work. The first thing is that we must start working. Unfortunately, we don't find that that is the kind of thing which is taking place. So, we have to start from that particular thing and think beyond the traditional focus on quality. Another thing is going through a process of personal change, and it is being said that dialogue is the terminology for achieving the best. Dialogue with whom? Dialogue with the people, dialogue with the media, dialogue with the representatives of the persons, dialogue with your own team members, dialogue with your seniors, dialogue with your subordinates, interaction with all. That is the ideas coming from different kind of the sources. Those ideas are to be culminated at one end, and we have to formulate our plan of action for going ahead with. Nevertheless, there are every chances that, well, we may not succeed. Well, if we won't succeed, we will recede from there, and we will be, but in that scenario, we will be learning from there. So that is why it is being said that a quick action is always a welcome move. If you will take a quick action, that would be, and it goes wrong, you will immediately be able to recede therefrom, and you will be able to rectify it. Rather than thinking for 2 long years that what is to be done, and where is the guarantee that what you do after 2 years, that would not fall prey to an unsuccess. It could also be an unsuccessful venture on your part, so then what will you do? So that means that in that process you will be losing 2 years. And the another thing is that we must institutionalize the things. Things should not be left only at individualizational model or approach itself. If the things are institutionalized, the successor is definitely going to gain therefrom. Otherwise, what would happen? What X has done, Y will come and will spend more than half of his or her tenure in undoing whatever was done by X, and that is at the cost of the development as well as the regulation of affairs by that particular organization, which will put the whole developmental efforts of the country, of the state, of the district, of the block, of the village at stake.
I think you have rightly said about what should be the right kind of approach for the effective implementation. But you have also pointed out that this same culture which is earlier in the government organization is also creeping up in the private organization. So this is one thing which is alarming, because they also, I mean, what the bureaucratic culture, I think one way or other way, I think we are finding it is also other way, which we find that private sector is something which is most efficient and most effective in implementing the policies of I mean,
they are efficient because they know that if they don't perform, they will be chucked down.
But still, I mean, we find these days
it is happening. Yeah, it is happening.
To see, we had yesterday a big advertisement about the electoral, and a full page advertisement. So I thought that why not check my electoral, I mean, whether it has been. I went to a booth level officer, I found that that fellow was not there. In the advertisement it was mentioned 10 to 5, and all the 7 days he will be available. But the booth officer, when I went to that primary school, he said he'll come at 12 o'clock. When I went to the south in charge, which is the STM DM office, and there also the person at 11:30, no one was there, and the old man came and he called up the SDM on his mobile, which was given in the newspaper, but the mobile was switched off. So this is so much of money is being spent by the newspaper and by the government in newspaper giving a full advertisement. Then we see.
So that gives a clear picture of the gap between what we do say and what we do preach.
Yeah, that is
so that gap has to be done away with. Who will do away with it? See, if you have felt a pinch of it, you see, you can bring in some kind of element of change in it only if you are able to vote.
Yeah.
You will vote only if you find your name will be there.
Yeah.
And if it is being identified that such kind of the people can vote against us, then definitely why
Yeah.
your name
Yeah.
be figuring
And
over there at all?
one of the very important in a democracy is what we call the public assent or public involvement. That is where it is lacking. As long it is lacking, I think the implementation, apart from all these things, I think that pays much where it try to take the implementation of the policy. So that is where I think involvement is important. So we had a good session on the policy implementation, and I hope you all, got the details of it with various other aspects. I think in the next section we will be trying to discuss more on the policy aspects. Thanking you for this session.
Sure.
I never dreamt of continuing my higher education. I got married after 10 plus 2. Then household work, children's responsibilities. I mean, going to college was absolutely out of question. But IGNOU has given me a ray of hope. Now, along with my household responsibilities, I am pursuing my graduation. Sometimes, while working, I listen to IGNOU's radio program. When free, I go through IGNOU's print materials. And I even watch IGNOU's VCT, I mean TV programs. Feel the joy of edutainment with IGNOU. For more details, log on to www.ignou.ac.in or contact your nearest IGNOU's regional center.
Now things are different with me. My subordinates listen to me. I am also involved in all management decision-making meetings. And all this happened with IGNOU's MBA, which I managed while working.
For more details, log on to www.ignou.ac.in or contact your nearest IGNOU's regional center.
If I had been to school, by now I would have obtained a master's degree. I too would have had a name in society. I would have experimented with many novel ways of farming. Oh, what is the point of thinking all these things now? Even if I want to study, with children's responsibilities and farming the fields, I cannot leave all these and go to college.
Ramu seems to be very worried nowadays. While going back from school, I shall inquire him.
Oh, what to do?
Oh, Ramu, your wife told me that you are very worried about your studies. Well, I have a good news for you, Ramu. All that you have to do is to appear for IGNOU's non-formal streams